of your country, bad things happen, and I've seen it happen. I'll never forget it. Some of you know the story, some of you don't. You might be new to listening to For the People, but I have said time and again that this program, For the People, is steeped in a lot of rich history. Trailblazing broadcast, excellence in broadcast, because this show actually has paved the way for so many broadcasters on the air today if it wasn't for Chuck Harder starting this broadcast For the People. But I remember back in the 90s where Chuck wanted to take the network bigger than what it was, and with Pat Schode at the UAW, and bad things started happening with that deal. But there was a letter, as a young man, read it. Ed Miller was the president, and Pat Schode was the director of the network that I was working for, Chuck's network, as a matter of fact, the People's Radio Network. It became UBN, the United Broadcasting Network. Hillary Clinton demanded the firing of Chuck Harder and then put an 18-year audit on Chuck, discredited his name, ruined his reputation and his livelihood. A broadcaster, well, since his early teens, where he started out as a teenage disc jockey in Elgin, Illinois. Chuck was threatened. I can't tell you how many times that he'd be killed, and, Chuck took these threats seriously. He made sure that he was armed. He made sure that, he wasn't in the open anywhere. But the black helicopters he used to talk about and things like that during the Clinton administration, they had an eye on him. And they had an ear, too. They used to listen to his program all the time. 350-plus radio stations, 60 cable outlets at the time for the 90s wasn't shabby. But Chuck spoke truth to power. Now, I didn't agree with every single guest that he had on, but I don't know any host that I agree with every single guest that comes on the broadcast, but enough of what Chuck talked about was 100% accurate. But there is a price to be paid when you start standing up for freedom and start really putting the pieces together to educate people to think for themselves, to know what the truth is, so they can take that truth to the ballot box. So if people really knew and know what's going on and it's principle over party, this country would be a completely different place, don't you think? But the media does control a lot, don't they? I was just having a conversation the other day about a public library. When was the last time you checked out a library book to research? Some of the libraries are actually quite impressive. But the neat thing about the library is that you can check out a book for free. You don't have to buy it. That's right. You don't have to buy the book. You check it out and you return it. And you can have it out for several weeks. The latest titles. And I love reading. I might get my library card renewed. I think so. I buy too many books. Well, you can get the stuff on the computers too, but there's nothing like a nice book. I had to promote the library. A friend of ours here at For the People, he's a librarian, and he might be listening in West Palm Beach. Great librarian. Guy knows where every book is, just about. Well, that's their job. But the guy probably reads every book that comes in there too. But let me encourage you, over the summer, some of you do that. You find a nice big book and you finish it. But it's amazing. You learn stuff too, especially if you get the history ones. But the fiction books are as good as gold. But just remembering that garbage just brings up the conspiracies and the things that happen. And there are shows like Alex Jones, and maybe you're listening to a station that might air his show. I know in Kansas City, our affiliate, I believe that they air his broadcast there. But if they don't, forgive me. But you know what I'm talking about. He takes a lot of heat, and I just heard during the IMUS program this morning, and it's something that I didn't realize about him, is for what he does. Nobody really knows where he broadcasts from. And it's very difficult to actually find any email, unless you know him or been in contact with his booker, or a phone number or whereabouts of where exactly he is. that you literally have to go underground. And I was thinking about another broadcaster that has done the same thing. Glenn Beck. He used to be in New York. Remember, he was on Fox News Channel, and then he was putting all his energy and effort and talking and educating about the cabal and connecting those dots to the money, and George Soros calling him the spooky man. Well, shortly after all of that, the chalkboards and all of that, he moved to Texas on a compound. And Don Imus actually has a compound or a ranch, but he's well protected. But, Glenn Beck, compound. And it kind of just, brought it back for me because Chuck had a compound. He had barbed wire and a fence. He had security. I mean, is this the price that you have to pay these days to not be fluff? I mean, you can find a bunch of fluffy shows that are just nice to everybody, doesn't call anybody out, doesn't really challenge anybody to go above and beyond the basic headlines from USA Today, Washington Post, New York Times, the Daily News, wherever you get the news from, to question it, or question our leaders. Oh, my God, don't do that. And are we really supposed to take verbatim? They call it the news. The papers that come out, the propaganda in the papers to brainwash you. That's their job, to brainwash you. I'm just amazed to see the all-time low that the established media were. Once upon a time, there was a time where people did actually trust the networks. Out of anything good on the dial these days, seriously, is Fox News Channel. Not all their shows, because I think they've gotten more left. Supposedly, Bill O'Reilly with Sinclair Broadcasting or another media group is going to come back on the air or on a TV show or whatever, and perhaps give Fox News a run for their money, because they have taken a leftist lean. And the main reason why they do that is because of advertising dollars. Advertising. Because if it's controversial, they don't want to attach their name to it. So if you're kind of doing the dance to the left, well, you can get them. So they're dancing all over the place, depending on what the program. Well, I mean, Shepard Smith, so far to the left, it's not even funny. They call it true journalism, but you can hear this arrogance when it comes towards Donald Trump. It's spewing out of his mouth. Shepard Smith, yes. And there's several other broadcasts that just irritate me on Fox, but just there was a time where it was decent. But I think that there might be a time, and if Bill O'Reilly goes back on, he'll be the star of that network and hopefully attract other true conservatives to the brand to try to debunk the escalation of garbage that's on the airwaves today. There's just so much of it, and it's poisoning. You talk about the poison that goes out in North Korea with their children, or Iran, where they indoctrinate the kids death to America and call us the great Satan. Equally responsible for that in a much damaging fashion is the liberal media on seeding these truths. And you just think, well, people are adult enough, they're big enough, they know about. Thankfully, there's people that their logic circuits are, on. And these people don't just take it at face value. They understand that they have to do a little research and thinking for themselves and not to take it at face value. You think that some people would do that once they got burned. But some people, they don't understand. Now, isn't there any truth to the thought pattern that when people get older, they become more conservative? I think it depends on who your friends are and where you live. Because when you go to New York, it's pretty darn evident under de Blasio that that's not true, and it could be pollution that could be eroding the thinking. I'm not sure. And then especially out on the left coast. So bizarre, and I wish to God we could be talking about the economy, healthcare, ridding the VA of the bad service that our vets get, or fixing our planes and how we're doing that with the Lockheed Martin or Boeing with our jets, so we got enough oxygen for our pilots. I think back at some of the news stories we've done over the last several weeks, and it's just this stuff just, to me, takes away with it. Yeah, the Turkey president, yeah, he's there trying to strengthen our relationships with them. They have problems with ISIS and terrorism. Hopefully, we can get more allies on our side to be able to do this. I think about some of the reports that are coming in, and I just want to be optimistic about this because really I'm not a pessimist, but sometimes this war or wars that are going on, especially the one in Iraq and Mosul, they're saying that ISIS on brink of total defeat in Mosul. According to the coalition, or a spokesperson for the coalition, says that the last of the Islamic State militants remaining in the Iraqi city of Mosul were completely surrounded and on the brink of total defeat. A spokesperson for the U.S.-led coalition said Tuesday, which is today, Iraqi forces have reduced the amount of territory held by ISIS in this city around 129 square miles. Iraqi Brigadier General Yadin Rasowski said that a news conference that Reuters reported that the recent advancement in Mosul came after Brett McGurk, a special presidential envoy for the coalition against the Islamic State, said yesterday that the fight against the militants was entering its final stages. The world is now seeing that Iraq soldiers are completely destroying, and that's a good news. So they've been trained by us. But we've seen Mosul fall not once, but twice. And this is going to have to be an ongoing deal where we're there with a coalition that supports that other than just the U.S., but it just seems like we've been there with our men training because we do it better, folks, than anybody. If they pay attention and they do it. The problem there is that we lost footing there in Iraq, and don't forget it. Barack Hussein Obama withdrew troops, and it created the vacuum known as ISIS. Thank you, Barack Hussein Obama. Yeah, he did. Well, you say he had good intentions. What do they say about the road to hell? Road to hell paved with good intentions. Here's another sick sex crime, and I just can't believe I got to talk about it, but I do. But thank God there's a happy conclusion here. A brain surgeon, Dr. James Call, was arrested at his home in Santa Cruz in this case involving a child under the age of 10 and another one, 14. He was booked into the Santa Cruz County Jail and being held there without bail. Watsonville Police Captain George Jamra says nurse Rachel Brandon was arrested May 10th and charged with 11 felonies, including child sexual abuse, as well as multiple charges related to the production of child pornography. Walcott and Brandon worked at the Dominican Hospital in Santa Cruz. KSBW.com reported that Coate was he was disciplined for a botched brain surgery, apparently in 2002, according to the board. An X-ray showed an aneurysm on the side of a 36-year-old's head. Coate mistakenly attempted to remove the aneurysm from the patient's right side, the report said. Zamora said a third unidentified suspect is in custody outside of California, so that's broken up. A brain surgeon and his nurse. Sex crimes. Unbelievable. But thank God they got snagged. Thank God. But again, the scars they put on these kids. You never can be too careful. You think you put your hands in the right hands with the doctor, and they're supposed to be healing hands, and yet they're doing all this damage psychologically and violating people against their will. Just it's the horriblest thing that they can do. There's a hot place, and you know where, that these people are going to go. By the way, this is a for the people alert, and this has to do with caffeine.